I still wake up some nights tasting cotton dust and hot iron in the back of my throat, even though I never set foot in that mill a day in my life. It started the summer Luke turned 6, the year the mountain laurel bloomed thick and the creek ran low enough you could walk across it on the rocks without getting your ankles wet. We lived up on Sugar Fork then, just me and him in the little white house my daddy built before the war took him. My husband Ray had lit out 3 years earlier with a waitress from the truck stop in Marshall, and I reckon I was still raw from it, working double shifts at the textile outlet just to keep the lights on. Luke was all I had, a quiet boy with pale hair that stuck up no matter how much water I slicked it down with, and eyes the color of river ice. It was late June when he first said something that stopped me cold. We were sitting on the porch swing after supper, lightning bugs blinking on and off like somebody turning a flashlight loose in the yard. He was pushing himself back and forth with one foot, slow, the chain creaking the way it always did. Out of nowhere, he said, "Mama, the fire was so loud you couldn't even hear yourself pray." I laughed, thought he'd heard some old folks talking at church. "What fire, baby?" He looked at me like I was the child and answered, "The one that got me in '43. I was 24. Name was Tommy then." I told myself kids say strange things. My own mama swore I talked to my dead granddaddy when I was 4. But Luke kept on. He'd wake up coughing like his lungs were full of smoke, clawing at the sheets, calling for people I never knew. Etta, Ruth Ann, Mr. Clarence. Said the boiler blew at 11:17 exactly, that the doors was chained from the outside because the men had been talking union. Said he could still feel the lint catching fire on his arms, how it flared blue before it turned orange and ate him alive. I tried to put a stop to it. Took him to the pediatrician in Weaverville, a tired old man who smelled like camphor and bourbon. He shined a light in Luke's throat and told me children have vivid imaginations. Maybe he'd seen something on television. There wasn't much television up our way in 2009, just whatever the satellite dish felt like giving us when the leaves weren't too thick. But I nodded like it made sense. That night Luke drew a picture with his crayons, a long building with smoke pouring out the windows, little stick people beating on doors that wouldn't open, flames licking up the sides like devil tongues. In the corner he wrote in crooked letters, "Riverside Mill, don't trust Mr. Hawley." I stared at that picture a long time. My own granddaddy had worked at Riverside back before it shut down for good. He died when I was 9, but I remembered him talking about a fire, how the company never paid the families right. I never said a word about it to Luke, not once. A week later, we were driving back from the Walmart in Asheville, and Luke started kicking the back of my seat. "Mama, turn here, turn here." I thought he had to pee, but he was pointing down a dirt track I hadn't been on since I was a girl. "I need to go home," he said, voice shaking. "Please." Something in the way he said it made the hairs on my arms stand up. I turned. We bumped along that old road until we came to Mount Olive Baptist Cemetery, weeds growing high around the stones. Luke jumped out before I even had the truck in park and ran straight to a road toward the back. I followed, heart thumping for reasons I couldn't name. The stone was cracked clean down the middle, letters worn but still readable. Tommy J. Whittaker, beloved son and brother, born March 12, 1919, died October 8, 1943. Luke put his little hand on the dates and looked up at me with eyes too old for his face. "That's me, Mama. That's where they put me the first time." I don't remember driving home. I just remember the smell of hot vinyl and the way Luke hummed an old hymn under his breath, one they hadn't sung in church since I was a girl. After that, he started asking to be taken to Mama Etta. Said she was buried under the cedar tree with the family Bible in her arms because the flood of '44 washed the house away, and that was all they could save. I told him there wasn't any Mama Etta, that he was confused, but he'd cry so hard his whole body shook. One Sunday after services, I gave in. We drove out to the old Whittaker plot on the ridge above the French Broad. Sure enough, there was a cedar, gnarled and ancient, and a stone that read Etta Whittaker,
1899, 1944. Luke dropped to his knees and started digging with his bare hands like a dog, dirt flying everywhere. I tried to pull him away, but he fought me, screaming that the good book was right there, that he promised he'd come back for it. 10 inches down, his fingers hit something hard. I thought it was a rock until I saw the black leather corner. A Bible, swollen with damp and age, pages stuck together. When I opened it, water damage had turned most of it to pulp, but the family record page was still legible. Somebody had written in spidery ink, Thomas James Whitaker, born March 12, 1919, died in the Riverside fire. And underneath, in different ink, almost like an afterthought, he will rise again. I made Luke leave it there, said graves ought to stay closed. He cried all the way home, big tears cutting tracks through the dirt on his cheeks. That fall, he started sleepwalking. I'd wake to the creak of the screen door and find him in the yard staring at the mountains, arms out like he was feeling for heat that wasn't there. One night I followed him. He walked clean down the gravel road in his pajamas and bare feet, past the mailbox, past the cornfield gone to briars, until he stopped at the edge of the woods. Moon was full and bright enough to hurt your eyes. He just stood there whispering, I told y'all I'd tell. I told y'all. I scooped him up and carried him home. He was burning hot, skin dry as paper. That was the first time I smelt it. Smoke on him. Real smoke, like he'd been standing next to a brush fire. But there wasn't no fire, just a smell clinging to his hair, his nightshirt, the hollow of his throat. Winter came early that year. We burned hickory in the stove to keep the chill out. Luke took to sitting as close to the flames as he could get without scorching himself, staring into 'em like he was waiting for something. One night in January, the power went out. Big ice storm knocked the lines down for 3 days. We were bundled up by the stove when Luke started talking in a voice that wasn't his. Deeper, rough, like a grown man who'd smoked unfiltered Camels his whole life. They locked us in, Ruthie, he said, calling me by a name nobody ever used. Harley and them company men chained the doors and walked away. Said we was troublemakers, said we didn't deserve to breathe free air. His eyes reflected the fire something fierce. I clawed till my fingers was gone. I screamed your name till my throat cooked. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. He reached out and took my hand, and his grip was strong, man strong. I came all this way to tell. They can't keep it quiet no more. 27 souls in that building, and not one got justice. Then he blinked, and it was just my little boy again, confused and shivering. Mama, why does it hurt? He asked, voice small. I held him till morning, rocking him like when he was a baby, feeling the heat pouring off him like fever. Spring came, red buds blooming blood bright along the creek. Luke got quieter. He'd sit on the porch swing again, but didn't push it no more, just sat still, looking out at nothing. One afternoon he asked for a pencil and paper. When I brought it, he drew the mill the way it must have looked before the fire. Long brick building, tall windows, the big chimney that fell the year I was born. He drew men standing out front, holding signs, "We want fair pay." And in the doorway he drew another man, tall, wearing a hat, holding a chain and padlock. Underneath he wrote, "Mr. Hawley," in careful block letters. That night I woke to the smell of smoke so strong I thought the house was ablaze. I ran to Luke's room, but his bed was empty, covers thrown back. Front door standing wide open, snow blowing in across the floor though it was April. I grabbed my coat and Daddy's old flashlight and ran outside, calling his name till my voice cracked. Tracks in the mud, little bare feet, headed straight down the ridge toward the river. I followed them as long as I could, past the blackberry thicket, past the old tobacco barn, until they reached the water's edge and just stopped. Creek was running high from the fall, loud and cold and black under the moon. I stood there screaming for him till my throat bled. They dragged the creek for 5 days. Never found him. Sheriff said he must have got swept under the falls, that bodies sometimes never come up in spring flood. I nodded like it made sense, signed whatever papers they put in front of me. 3 weeks later, a lady from Child Services came by with questions I couldn't answer. They closed the file eventually. Life kept on, the way it don't care what you lost. But some nights, when the wind comes down off Cold Mountain just right, I still smell it. Cotton dust burning, hot metal, the sweet sick scent of human hair catching fire. And sometimes, late, I hear the porch swing creaking slow, back and forth, though nobody sat in it since the day he disappeared. I keep that ruined Bible on the shelf above the stove now. Every few months I open it, careful, like it might bite. The pages are black.
We never told a soul what we named her. In the summer of 1989, the heat sat on Yancey County like a wet wool blanket, and Ellen carried that baby high and proud until the night she woke me up screaming. Blood everywhere, soaking the sheets, running down her legs onto the pine floor we'd just refinished. I carried her to the truck and drove like hell to the little hospital in Burnsville. But the whole way she kept whispering, "She's gone, Jack. She's already gone." They tried to save them both, but our daughter came out blue and still. Tiny fingers curled like she was already holding on to something we couldn't see. The nurse wrapped her in a receiving blanket Ellen had pieced from feed sack scraps, little yellow ducks and pink roses, and handed her to me for just a minute. She weighed next to nothing. We named her Clara right there in the delivery room after Ellen's mama, and 2 days later we buried her under the dogwood behind the home place. No preacher, no marker, just a flat river stone I carved her name on with my pocket knife. Ellen never got over it. She'd sit on the back porch for hours staring at that dogwood like it might bloom babies instead of flowers. We tried again, Lord knows we tried, but nothing ever took. The house stayed quiet, too quiet, and the years slid by slow and gray. It was the first Sunday in April 2013 when she walked into Little Ivy Baptist. I was up in the choir loft pretending to sing bass when I saw Ellen stand up straight in the pew like somebody'd run ice down her spine. A woman was coming down the center aisle, maybe 24, 25 years old, dark hair pulled back simple, wearing a plain blue dress that looked like it came from the Goodwill in Spruce Pine. She stopped right in front of our row and looked straight at Ellen with eyes the color of creek water in March. Then she smiled, the way a child smiles when they've been lost and finally spot their mama in a crowd. Ellen made this sound, half sob, half laugh, and opened her arms. The woman walked right into him and laid her head on Ellen's shoulder like she'd done it 1,000 times. After church, they talked in the yard under the oak while I stood off pretending to shake hands with folks I'd known my whole life. I heard pieces. She said her name was Clara June Hensley, raised over in Dayton, Ohio, by a couple who adopted her when she was left on a church doorstep in '89. Said she'd always known she belonged somewhere else, that she'd started having dreams about a little white house with green tin roof and a dogwood out back. Dreams about a quilt with yellow ducks and a woman singing Pretty Sorrow in a cracked voice while she bled on a kitchen floor. She lifted her dress just enough to show a heart-shaped birthmark low on her left hip. Exact place, exact shape as the one I'd seen on our stillborn girl that night in the hospital. Ellen brought her home before I could even find words to argue. Just said, "Jack, look at her. It's our Clara. Come back to us." And the woman, Clara, looked at me with those clear eyes and said, "Daddy, I waited till I was big enough this time." The first weeks were almost sweet. She helped Ellen in the garden, knew without being told which tomatoes needed pinching and where the spearmint grew wild down by the branch. She could find things we'd lost years ago. Ellen's mama's thimble behind the stove, my old case knife that fell off the tractor in '95. At night, she'd sit on the porch swing humming that same lullaby Ellen sang the night we lost her.
voice soft as moth wings. I'd stand inside the screen door watching them rock together, Ellen's hands stroking Clara's hair like she was still that tiny thing wrapped in ducks and roses. But little things started to fray at the edges. She wouldn't never go near the dogwood alone. If Ellen walked out there to pull weeds, Clara stayed on the porch watching like a dog that's been whipped for digging up flowers. She asked questions no stranger should know to ask, wanted to know why we never put a proper stone on the grave, why we wrapped the quilt around her instead of burying it separate. Said she could still feel the softness against her skin when the dirt started falling. Then the dream started. Ellen began waking in the night gasping, saying Clara was standing at the foot of the bed whispering, "Mama, I'm not finished growing yet." Said the girl's eyes were black in the dark, no whites at all, and her mouth moved wrong, like something inside was learning how words fit. I told Ellen it was just nightmares, grief wearing a new face, but I started sleeping lighter, hand on the 38 under my pillow. One morning I came in from feeding the chickens and found Clara in the kitchen with the flour sack quilt spread out on the table, the same one we'd buried her in. She was tracing the faded ducks with one finger, real slow, like she was reading Braille. Dirt clung to the seams, dark and damp, smelling of clay and roots. "You shouldn't have left me so long," she said without looking up. "Roots grow deep when you leave something waiting." I made her put it away, told Ellen we had to draw a line. But Ellen wouldn't hear it. She started calling the girl my baby again, same way she did in the hospital that night, voice cracking on the words like they still hurt coming out. The nights got heavier. You could feel the house holding its breath after the sun went down. I'd hear the floorboards creak in the room we'd fixed up for her. Slow, deliberate steps, back and forth, back and forth. Sometimes the steps would stop right outside our bedroom door, and I'd lay there staring at the knob, waiting for it to turn. It never did. But in the morning, there'd be smudges on the wallpaper, handprints too small and too low to be Clara's grown ones, like something had pressed its palms there while we slept. Ellen began losing weight. Her eyes sank back and her skin went the color of tallow. She'd sit for hours rocking Clara, humming that lullaby, but her hands shook so bad she could barely hold the tune. One night I woke up and Ellen wasn't beside me. I found 'em in the kitchen, Ellen at the table with her head down on her arms, Clara standing behind her brushing her hair real gentle, over and over, humming low. Moonlight came through the window and lit 'em silver, and for just a second I thought I saw the brush passing through hair that wasn't there no more, just bare skull shining through. The last night they were in the house, I woke to the sound of the back door closing soft. I grabbed the pistol and went looking. Found the kitchen empty, the dogwood quilt gone from the trunk where we kept it locked. The back door was standing open, and the yard was bright with moonlight. I saw them walking across the field toward the tree, Ellen barefoot in her nightgown, Clara leading her by the hand. Ellen was crying, but not like she was scared, more like somebody who'd been carrying a weight for 24 years and finally got to set it down. I started after him, calling Ellen's name, but my voice came out thin, like the mountains swallowed it whole. By the time I reached the dogwood, they were kneeling at the spot where we buried the baby all those years ago. Clara had the quilt spread out on the ground and was digging with her bare hands, dirt flying up black in the moonlight. Ellen just watched, swaying a little, smiling like she was at a birthing instead of a grave. I got within 20 feet and something stopped me cold. The air turned thick, tasting like pennies and wet leaves. Clara looked up then, face streaked with dirt, eyes shining wet. "Go back to the house, Daddy," she said, voice sweet as spring water. "Mama and me got to finish what we started." I don't know how long I stood there. Long enough for the hole to get deep, long enough for the first pink of dawn to show behind the ridge. When I finally made my legs move, I went back inside and sat at the kitchen table with the pistol in my lap until the sun was full up. They were gone. Quilt, truck, Ellen's clothes from the line, everything. Just a raw hole under the dogwood and a little pile of yellowed feed sack scraps, too rotted to tell what they'd been. I called the sheriff, told him my wife left with a stranger. They looked around, asked questions, wrote it down as voluntary departure. Folks in town said Ellen finally snapped from grief, that she'd run off with some woman who fed her a cruel fantasy. They felt sorry for me, brought casseroles, shook their heads. I still live here, keep the lights on all night, every night. The dogwood bloomed blood red that spring, heavier than I ever seen it. Some mornings I find soft little handprints in the dew on the porch rail, too small for any grown woman. And once, just once, I found a single yellow duck from that old quilt lying on the kitchen table, clean as the day Ellen pieced it, no dirt, no rot. I sleep with the lights on and the doors locked, but I know locks don't keep out what's already been invited in. Sometimes, late, when the wind moves through the dogwood just right, I can hear two voices singing Pretty Sorrow together, one old and broken, one young and sweet, drifting farther and farther up the holler like they walking home a road that don't end this side of the grave. I ain't gone looking. Some things you don't follow, no matter how loud they call you daddy.
They say Black Hollow Road don't forgive mistakes. Runs like a black ribbon through the laurel slicks between Madison County and the Tennessee line. So crooked the sun only hits it right for maybe 20 minutes at noon. That's where we lost Sarah in October of '98. She was 19, driving my old shitty pickup back from her shift at the Dollar General in Hot Springs, radio loud enough to rattle the windows, singing along to that Reba song she loved. Witness said she took the curve by the old Baptist cemetery too fast, tires slid on wet leaves, and the truck rolled 3 times before it come to rest upside down against a poplar. I was the one who found her. Headlights still burning, steam hissing out the radiator like a dying breath. I crawled through the broken window and held her hand while she looked up at me with those green eyes going glassy. She tried to speak, but there was just blood bubbling at the corner of her mouth. By the time the ambulance got there, she was gone. I knew it the second her fingers went cold in mine. We buried her on a Tuesday under a sky the color of a bruise. Mama took to her bed and never really got back up. I kept working the sawmill, drinking too much coffee and too much bourbon, trying to outrun the quiet that settled in our house like another family member nobody wanted to name. 3 years went by slow as creek water in January. Then one Saturday in early spring, Mama called me from the porch, voice trembling like a leaf in high wind. There was a girl standing at the end of our dirt drive, barefoot, wearing a thin cotton dress that had seen better days. Same height as Sarah, same dark hair hanging in tangles down her back. When she turned around, my heart stopped dead. It was Sarah's face, older maybe, thinner, but Sarah all the same. Same scar on her left knee from when she fell off the hay wagon when we were kids. Same little half-moon birthmark just above a waistband you could only see when she reached up high. She looked at us like she was trying to place something and said, real soft, "Mama? Lena?" Then she walked straight into Mama's arms and started crying like a lost child. She told us her name was Emily now. Said she'd been living over in Cott County with a family that found her walking along the interstate with no shoes and no memory, summer of '98. Doctors called it fugue state, said she must have been in an accident and wandered off before anybody got there. The dates were all wrong, but the scars were right, the birthmark, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear with her left hand. Mama didn't ask too many questions. She just opened the door and let her come home. At first, it was almost like a miracle. Mama got out of bed, started cooking again. Emily helped hang laundry and weed the garden, humming those same little tunes Sarah used to hum. But little things started piling up wrong. She wouldn't touch cornbread, said the smell turned her stomach. Sarah would have fought you for the last crumb.
When the church choir sang Amazing Grace that first Sunday she was back, she stood up in the middle of it and walked straight out, face white as chalk. Sarah knew every verse by heart and would sing it loud enough to drown out the preacher. She asked about the wreck the way you ask about somebody else's bad dream. Wanted to know if the truck burned, if anybody heard her screaming, if I got there before she died. I told her yes, no, maybe, whatever I thought she could stand to hear. She'd sit on the porch swing at dusk, staring down the hollow like she was waiting for something to come walking up the road. Then came the morning I found her in the barn. Sun just breaking over the ridge, light slanting gold through the cracks in the siding. She was sitting on an old feed barrel, Daddy's straight razor open in her lap, running a thumb slow along the edge like she was testing how much it would take. There were tears cutting clean tracks through the dust on her cheeks. When I stepped on a loose board, she didn't even startle, just looked up and said, "I owe a debt, Lena." Something followed me out. Then she folded the razor real careful and slipped it into her pocket. That night she came to my room after Mama was asleep, sat on the foot of my bed in the dark and spoke so quiet I had to strain to hear. "They worked on me 47 minutes, she said. That's what the report would have said if anybody ever fouled one. 47 minutes with no heartbeat, long enough for the real me to go on ahead." She reached out and touched my wrist. Her fingers were ice cold even though the house was warm. "Something was waiting in the ditch, Lena. Something that looked like roadkill but wasn't. It saw the body was empty and crawled right in while the blood was still wet. I've been trying to get back ever since." I told her she was confused, that she'd had a head injury, that we'd take her to the doctor in the morning. She just smiled the saddest smile I ever saw and said, "You always did try to fix things that was broken too long." After that, she started wandering at night. I'd hear the screen door ease open, the creak of the porch boards, then nothing. Sometimes she'd come back before dawn with briars in her hair and her feet cut up. Sometimes she wouldn't come back till the sun was high, and she'd be sitting at the kitchen table like she'd never left, staring at Sarah's senior picture on the wall. Mama got scared, started locking the doors, hiding the keys. Emily would stand outside my bedroom window after midnight and whisper through the screen, "Let me in, sister. It's cold out here, and I'm so tired of pretending." I'd lay there stiff, covers pulled to my chin, telling myself it was just a wind. One Thursday in July, the sky turned the color of old nickels, and the air got so still you could hear a dog bark 3 ridges away. I come home from the mill and the house was too quiet. Mama was rocking on the porch with a rosary, eyes red and swollen. Said Emily had been in the kitchen cutting up tomatoes for supper, humming that Reba song, when all of a sudden she dropped a knife and walked out the back door without a word, just left the tomatoes bleeding on the counter. We searched till dark, called a name till our voices gave out. Found a straight razor lying open in the yard like she dropped it running. Nothing else. No note, no footprints leading away, nothing. Sheriff came and went. Said grown women leave home sometimes, even ones with confused memories. They dragged the creek out of habit more than hope. Divers found an old rusted muffler in a shopping cart, but no body. Mama lasted another year. Died in her sleep the night of the first hard frost, clutching Sarah's baby picture to her chest. I buried her next to the empty grave we'd put Sarah in, because the coffin had been closed and nobody ever checked twice. I still live in that house, keep the doors locked and the porch light burning. Some nights when the fog rolls up the hollow thick as wool, I hear bare feet on the boards outside, slow, like somebody pacing and trying to remember the way in. Sometimes the screen door creaks like a hand is testing a latch. I never answer. I just sit in the dark with Daddy's 12 gauge across my knees and wait for morning. Last week I found a straight razor on the kitchen table, blade polished bright. A single dark hair curled on the edge that sure as hell ain't mine. I wrapped it in oilcloth and buried it under the steps where the ground stays cold. But I know it won't stay buried. Things that come back wrong always find their way to the surface again. And when the fog stick and the dogs won't bark and the clock stops dead at 11:47, I can feel her standing just outside the ring of porch light, waiting for me to say her name so she can finish what she started. I ain't said it yet, but some nights I'm so tired and the house is so empty and the quiet gets so loud I can hardly stand it. Some nights I come real close.
My Pawpaw Harlan never came home from the war. He left in '43 with the 28th Infantry, kissed my grandmother Ruth on the porch steps, and told her he'd be back before the chestnuts dropped. The chestnuts dropped, the leaves fell, the snow came, and then the telegram came. Killed by mortar fire in the Hergen Forest, December 12, 1944. They never found enough of 'em to send back, just as dog tags and a letter he'd written the night before, folded in his pocket. Mama kept that letter in a tin box under her bed and only read it when she thought nobody was looking. I was 12 when she let me see it once. The last line was burned into me. Tell Ruth I love her more than these old mountains love the morning, and if I don't make it, plant me a cedar so the wind can still find me. Years went by. Mama died in '89, still waiting on the porch every evening like he might come walking up the dirt road with his duffel slung over his shoulder. I kept the letter, the tin box, the cedar he never got planted. Life moved on slow and quiet the way it does up on B-Log, where the ridges crowd close and the mail only comes 3 times a week. Then one night in February 2017, I got a call from a veterans hospital in Johnson City, Tennessee. The nurse sounded worn thin, like somebody who'd seen too many men die in clean white beds. She asked if I was kin to Harlan Caleb McCaury, Company C, 112th Infantry Regiment. I told her I was his granddaughter. She said they had a patient, a man named Daniel Ray Carver, 52 years old, no living family, who'd been admitted for liver failure and dementia. For the last week, he'd been screaming my grandfather's name in his sleep, hollering it like he was back in the woods getting shelled. Said he spoke with a Carolina mountain drawl thick as pine pitch, even though he'd been born and raised in Ohio. When he was awake, he kept asking for Ruth, saying he had to give her something before the trees took him. I thought it was some kind of mix-up, maybe a coincidence with the names, but something in the nurse's voice made my stomach knot. I asked if I could come see him. She hesitated, then said he probably wouldn't last a weekend. I drove over the mountains the next morning, through Sam's Gap, where the wind cuts like a straight razor in winter. The hospital sat squat and gray against the hillside, windows glowing yellow in the dusk when I pulled in. The hall smelled like bleach and boiled cabbage. They'd put Daniel Carver in a room at the far end, away from the others, because he thrashed so bad. When I walked in, he was propped up in bed, skin the color of old paper, eyes sunk deep but sharp, the kind of sharp that sees clean through you. Tubes ran into his arms like clear vines. He looked at me a long time without speaking, then whispered, "You favor Ruth around the mouth." I asked how he knew my grandmother. He didn't answer right off, just reached under his pillow with trembling fingers and pulled out a silver pocket watch on a broken chain. My breath stopped. It was Pawpaw's Elgin, the one he'd carried since he was 16, the one lost in the mud of Germany 73 years ago. The crystal was cracked, the hands frozen at 9:47, and there was a dark stain across the back like old blood baked in. He pressed it into my hand. His skin was hot, fever hot. He gave me this, he said, voice rasping like leaves over gravel. Told me to carry it home if he couldn't. Said the trees were coming closer and he was tired of running. Then he started reciting Pawpaw's letter word for word, the whole thing, even the private parts about the night he and Mama first kissed behind the church house, even the last line about the cedar. I stood there shaking, tears running cold down my wrists. Nobody outside family had ever seen that letter. When he finished, he gripped my hand so hard the bones ground together.
"Tell Ruth I'm sorry," he whispered. "Tell her the watch kept ticking longer than I thought it would." His eyes rolled back, machines started their flat screaming, and the nurses pushed me gentle but firm into the hall. He was gone before they got the paddles on him. I drove home in a daze, the watch heavy in my coat pocket, like it was made of lead instead of silver. The mountains looked darker than usual, the hollers deeper, like something was listening. A week later, I came home from the feed store and found a small package on the porch. No stamp, no address, just my name scrawled in pencil on brown paper. Inside was a strip of olive drab cloth, stiff with old blood, wrapped around something hard. I knew what it was before I unwrapped it. The watch again, same crack, same frozen hands, but now the blood on the bandage was fresh, wet enough to smear when I touched it. There was a note, too, written on the back of a VA meal ticket in handwriting I didn't recognize. "He's still walking. The trees won't let him stop." I buried the watch that same day under the cedar I finally planted for Mama out back. Dug the hole deep past the clay till I hit the cool black earth that smells like forever. Poured a jar of branch water over it like baptizing, said the words from Psalm 23 the way Papa would have wanted. I thought that might settle things. It didn't. Some nights now, when the wind comes down off Roan Mountain and rattles the windows like loose teeth, I hear boots on the porch. Slow, measured steps, the way a man walks when his feet hurt and he's got a long way still to go. I ease the curtain back just enough to see. There's nobody there, just moonlight silver on the boards and the cedar swaying like it's listening for something. But the watch is ticking again. I hear it clear as anything, coming up through the floorboards, steady and patient, counting minutes that ran out a long time ago. Last night the ticking stopped at 9:47 exactly. The porch boards creaked once, long and deliberate, like somebody sat down heavy in the old ladder-back chair Mama kept out there. I sat up in bed with the shotgun across my knees till dawn, sweat cold down my back. When the sun finally came, pale and watery through the fog, I found muddy boot prints leading straight to the chair and stopping dead. Size 11, same as Papa wore. And pressed into the damp wood of the seat was the perfect outline of that Elgin watch, like somebody'd been carrying it in their pocket for 73 years and finally set it down to rest. I ain't moved it yet. I can't bring myself to. Some debts don't die with the man who owed 'em. Some promises outlive the tongue that made 'em. And out there in the dark between these mountains, something is still walking home with a watch that won't stop ticking and a letter it can't never deliver. I keep the cedar wad or the porch light burning, and every evening when the shadows stretch long across the yard, I sit a spell and listen for footsteps that sound like they've been marching since 1944. So far, they ain't never turned up the path, but they're getting closer. I can feel it in the wind.
Uncle Clyde swung from a pine tree in Rydesville, Georgia, on a morning so cold the breath hung in the air like smoke. It was June of 1962, and the state said he'd beaten a traveling preacher half to death with a fence post over $38 and a bottle of corn liquor. Everybody up on Bull Creek knew that wasn't true. Clyde never had a temper, never carried more than a pocket knife, and he'd been home milking when the preacher was found bleeding behind the colored church. But the sheriff needed somebody to blame. The jury was all white and in a hurry to get back to tobacco, and Clyde had a reputation for running shine. They hanged him anyway. I was 9 years old, standing behind my daddy's legs when they brought the news. Mama took to the bed for a month, and Daddy filled in the old well the next week, said bad water was the least of our worries now. The farm never felt right after that. The smokehouse door would be standing open when I knew I'd latched it, and sometimes at dusk you could hear a man clearing his throat down by the branch like he was fixing to speak but never did. Daddy sold off most of the land piece by piece, kept just the house and 10 acres around it, and died in '94 still swearing Clyde's name would be cleared one day. I inherited the place, worked the sawmill in spruce pine, and tried to forget the way the wind sounded like rope creaking whenever it moved through the locusts. In the fall of 2018, I got a letter forwarded from the Georgia Department of Corrections. Plain white envelope, my name typed neat. Inside was a single sheet with a pencil drawing so detailed it stole my breath. Our barn exactly as it looked before the roof started caving. The crooked lightning rod Daddy never fixed. The smokehouse with the hornet's nest under the eave. And the exact spot where the old well had been before we covered it with fieldstone and dirt. At the bottom, somebody had written in block letters, "Clyde was here." The warden called 2 days later, said they had an inmate on death row, Marcus Devereaux, 46 years old, convicted of killing 3 people in a trailer park outside Savannah. For the last year, Marcus had been asking for me by name, said he needed to give me something that belonged to my family. Said he dreamed about our farm every night, could describe every fence post and hog wallow. The warden thought it might bring the man peace before they put him down. I didn't want to go, but something pulled me south like a fish hook behind the ribs. Jackson Diagnostic is a low brick fortress that smells like bleach and boiled onions. They brought Marcus out in shackles, thin as fence wire, skin the color of tobacco juice. His eyes were pale gray, almost clear, and when he looked at me he smiled the same lopsided smile Clyde had when he was about to tell a lie you wanted to believe. He didn't shake my hand, couldn't with the cuffs. But he leaned across the table as far as the chain allowed and said real quiet, "Tell your mama the money's still where I left it, under the 3rd step of the smokehouse." I hadn't told a soul my mama was dead 15 years, and nobody alive knew about the roll of bills Clyde swore he never took from that preacher's coat. Every Sunday for 6 months, I drove the 6 hours down and 6 hours back. Marcus never asked for anything, never talked about his own case. He just talked about the farm like he left it yesterday. How the Red Mule was founded in '59, where Daddy hid the good whiskey behind the corn crib, the way the well water tasted of iron after a rain. He drew more maps, dozens of them, each one more accurate than the last. One afternoon he slid a folded square of paper across the table and told me not to open it till I got home. When I did, it was a perfect sketch of the inside of the smokehouse. Every hook, every salt barrel, and a big X under the bottom step. I went out there that night with a flashlight and a pry bar. The step come up easy, like the nails had worked loose on their own. Underneath was a Prince Albert can, rusted solid shut. Inside was $38 in damp bills and a silver cross on a broken chain, same one the preacher had been wearing when they found him. I sat on the cold ground till the moon went down, feeling the weight of something I couldn't name settle in my chest. Marcus's execution was set for the first week of May 2019. The week before, the prison called and said he was dead. Found him that morning sitting upright against the wall, neck twisted so far around his chin nearly touched his spine. Coroner wrote it up as suicide, said he must have slammed his head against the bunk until something gave. Guards swore the cameras never showed him move after lights out. That same night, our barn burned. I woke to the sky glowing orange over the ridge, ran barefoot through the briars with a bucket that did no good. By the time the volunteer fire department got there, it was just timbers and sparks. When the ashes cooled enough to walk through, I found a length of brand new manila rope coiled neat in the middle of what used to be the hayloft. No char on it, no melt, like it had been set there after the fire went out. Knot on one end was a perfect hangman's noose, 13 wraps, just like the state of Georgia used. I ain't been right since.
Some mornings I find footprints in the dew leading from the barn foundation to the smokehouse and stopping dead. Size 11, same as Clyde wore. The Prince Albert can is still in my pocket every day, money and cross both, heavy as guilt. And when the wind moves just right through the locusts behind the house, I swear I can hear that old creak again. Slow, steady, patient, like somebody's still swinging, waiting for the truth to cut him down. I wrote the governor, the parole board, anybody who'd read it. Sent the drawings, the money, the cross. They sent a polite letter back saying the case is closed, evidence destroyed, nothing to be done after 57 years. I reckon they right. But the rope is still in the smokehouse, hanging from a rafter that wasn't there before. Some nights it turns slow in a wind I can't feel, and the shadow it throws on the wall looks taller than any man has a right to be after all this time. I keep the doors locked and the dogs inside now, and when I hear that creak start up after midnight, I don't go look. Some debts don't get settled with letters or courts. Some wrongs just keep swinging till the rope rots or the tree falls, whichever comes last. I figure I got a few years yet to find out which one gives first.
The summer of 1977 was the hottest anybody could remember. The French Broad ran low and slow, so clear you could see the moss waving on the rocks like green hair. Daniel was 8, all elbows and freckles, always trailing after me with that gap-toothed grin. I was 14 and thought I knew everything. Mama had sent us down to the river to fish for supper because the garden was burning up and Daddy was working double shifts at the chair factory. We took Buster, our old coonhound, and a cane pole apiece. Daniel wanted to cross over to the deep hole on the far side where the big catfish hid. There'd been a hard freeze the winter before, and the ice had buckled the river something awful when it broke up in March. Left big slabs tilted every which way, some still hanging over the cut bank. I told him no, the current was tricky there, but Daniel never listened when he got an idea. I was baiting my hook with chicken liver when I heard the splash and Buster barking like the world was ending. By the time I turned around, Daniel was gone, just a swirl where he had been standing on that shelf of ice. Buster went in after him, paws scrabbling, and the river took him too. I ran the bank screaming till my throat bled, throwing rocks, anything to mark the spot. Daddy came with ropes and neighbors with boats, and they dragged for 3 days. Found Buster tangled in roots 2 miles downstream, bloated and staring. Never found Daniel. The river kept him like it keeps everything it wants. Mama never forgave me. She'd stand at the kitchen window staring at the water till the glass fogged with her breath, saying, "You were supposed to watch him, Tommy." She died in '97, still waiting for a body to bury. Daddy followed her 2 years later. I stayed on in the old house, worked the sawmill, kept to myself. The river stayed loud in my head every spring when the dogwoods bloomed. In March of 2017, I got a call from the Department of Social Services in Marshall. A caseworker asked if I'd ever lost a little brother named Daniel. Said they had a boy in foster care, maybe 10 years old, no known family, who'd been telling anybody who'd listened that his real name was Daniel Ray Carver, and he fell through the ice on the French Broad trying to save his dog in 1977. Said his big brother Tommy had a whistle with 2 short and 1 long that meant come home right now. My knees went out from under me right there in the kitchen. That whistle was something only me and Daniel knew. They brought him to the office in Asheville a week later. I walked in and he looked up from the coloring book, eyes the exact muddy hazel Daniel always had. And he dropped the crayon and ran straight into my chest, crying, "Tommy, I looked for you everywhere downstream. It was so dark and the water kept pulling." He even smelled like river mud and little boy sweat, same as I remembered. The state ran tests, blood, dental, the works. Nothing matched anybody living, and the DNA people said the closest relation was me, like a full sibling, which made no sense. But the boy knew things. Where we hid the .22 behind the loose board in the barn. The tree on the ridge where we carved TC plus DC inside a lopsided heart. The way Mama used to sing Barbary Allen off-key when she washed dishes. After 6 months of paperwork, they let me bring him home. I signed the papers with a hand that wouldn't quit shaking and carried him out to my truck like I was afraid he'd vanish if I set him down. For a while, it was the closest thing to grace I'd ever touched. He called me Tommy instead of Mr. Carver, slept in Daniel's old room, helped me feed the chickens like he'd done it all his life. He even laughed the same, head thrown back, Adam's apple bobbing like a cork. I caught myself thinking maybe God gave second chances after all. Then the sleepwalking started. First time was late April, full moon bright enough to read a newspaper by. I woke to the screen door banging and found his bed empty. Ran outside in my boxers, and there he was, barefoot in his pajamas, walking straight toward the river like he could see a path I couldn't. I caught him just as the water lapped his knees, cold as sin even in spring. He was stiff, eyes wide open, but nobody home, whispering, "Mama, I'm coming, wait for me." Mama had been dead 20 years. I carried him back dripping and put him in bed with me, held him till morning like when he was little and had nightmares about haunts. It happened more after that. Some nights I'd tie a string from his ankle to mine with a bell on it. Bell would jangle, and I'd wake to find him at the door, fingers on the knob, murmuring about how cold it was and how the rocks had faces. I started locking the bedroom, then the whole house, then nailing the windows shut. Didn't matter. He'd be standing at the glass staring out at the river, palms pressed flat, fog blooming where his breath hit. He began talking about the river like it was alive. Said it sang to him when the wind was right, low and sweet, promising it would keep him safe this time if he'd just come the rest of the way home. Said it still had his doll and wanted the set complete. I took him to doctors, preachers, even a woman in Hot Springs who reads coffee grounds. They all said trauma, imagination, give it time. Time wasn't fixing anything. Last week we had a hard rain, river running bank full and the color of coffee with too much milk. I'd kept him inside 3 days straight, curtains drawn, television loud. That night the power went out and the quiet rushed in like water through a busted dam. I found his bed empty again, window standing open, screen cut clean with the kitchen knife. I ran outside barefoot, mud sucking at my feet, screaming his name till my voice cracked. Found him on the big rock where we used to skip stones, water up to his waist and rising, arms out like he was greeting somebody I couldn't see. I waded in after him, current trying his best to take me too. Grabbed him around the chest and dragged him back to shore. He fought me hard, harder than any 10-year-old ought to be able to, crying, "Let me go, Tommy, she's waiting, Mama's waiting and Buster's barking." When we got to dry ground, he went limp and looked up at me with those eyes too old for his face and said real calm, "The river kept a piece of me the first time. It's lonely now. It wants the rest back so I can be all the way home." I ain't let him out of my sight since. Sleep in the recliner with him curled on the couch, one hand on his ankle like a handcuff made of flesh. Keep every light in the house burning and the radio turned to gospel. But the river is louder every night, rushing past the yard like it's whispering secrets against the windowsills. Sometimes when he thinks I'm asleep, he'll sit up and answer it, soft, like they're having a conversation I'm not meant to hear. This morning I found wet footprints on the kitchen floor, leading from his bedroom to the back door and stopping dead. Little bare feet, river mud still clinging. Door was locked from the inside, chain still on. I followed the prints with my heart hammering so hard it thought it'd bust a rib. They ended at the couch where he lay curled innocent, breathing slow, but his hair was wet and there was a minnow no bigger than a fingernail flopping dead on the pillow beside him. I don't know how many days I got left before the river comes up the hill itself. I keep the truck pointed toward high ground and the keys in my pocket. But when I look at that boy sleeping, I see my little brother's face under the new skin, and I wonder if running would even matter. Some things that get took don't ever truly leave the water.
They just wait patient till the rest of the family comes looking. And Lord help me, some nights I'm so tired of listening to that river sing Daniel's name that I almost open the door and let it finish what it started 40 years ago.
Cousin Ruth married my cousin Harlan on a Tuesday in May of 1938, when the dogwoods were so thick along the Clinch River you could smell 'em half a mile away. She was 19, raised up in the head of Lost Cove, and wore a dress her mama had pieced from Pilgrim flour sacks because store-bought cloth was dear. Harlan was 21, tall and quiet, with hands already rough from plowing behind a mule he didn't own. They stood under the oak by the river and said their vows while Preacher McBee sang "In the Sweet By and By" in that cracked tenor that always made the women cry. Ruth had a crown of Queen Anne's lace and wild phlox in her dark hair, and when Harlan kissed her, she laughed like water over stones. 3 weeks later, he was gone, drafted before the war even had a proper name over here, shipped out to Fort Benning and then across the water. He wrote her 8 letters. The 9th one came from the government. Ruth waited the way mountain women wait. She kept his side of the bed turned down, kept a cedar candle burning on the windowsill so he could find the house if his spirit got lost coming home. Folks said she walked to the iron bridge every evening at dusk, stood in the middle and looked downriver like the current might bring him back on a raft of leaves. One October night in 1944, the fog rolled in thick and yellow, and Ruth never came home. They found her Sunday shoes placed neat on the roadway, and the little bouquet of goldenrod she carried every trip crushed on the planks. River was running high from the rains, and it gave her up 3 days later, tangled in roots 2 miles downstream, wedding ring still on her finger, and the flour sack dress dark with water. We buried her beside the oak where she'd married him. Harlan's mama put a stone that read, "Ruth McCory, beloved wife, 1919-1944, waiting." Harlan himself never came back from Europe. A German bullet took him in the Hürtgen forest the same month Ruth jumped. They say the clinch kept them both in the end. I was born in '59, long after the war was history and the bridge had been painted green twice. I heard the story growing up, same as every kid in the holler did, but time thins things out. The old folks died off, the oak blew down in the storm, and the bridge got a new concrete railing nobody could jump from anymore. I moved to Knoxville for work in '88 and hardly thought of Ruth except when I crossed a river and felt the old pull in my chest. Then one Saturday morning in the spring of 2022, I was drinking coffee at the Market Square Farmers Market when a woman stopped dead in front of my table. She was maybe 33, 34, dark hair pulled back plain, wearing a faded chambray dress like something from an old photograph. She stared at me so long I asked if she was all right. She reached out and touched the sleeve of my flannel shirt like she was checking it was real, then whispered, "You're kin to Harlan McCory?" Not a question. I laughed, uneasy, and told her most folks named McCory around here were. She shook her head slow. "No, you've got his eyes, and the way you stand, weight on the left leg, he did that too." Her name, she said, was Evelyn Price, born 1989 in Knoxville, to parents she barely remembered. Said the memories started when she was 28, dreams of a wedding under an oak, flour sack dress scratching her skin, the taste of sassafras tea the women brewed after the ceremony, dreams of standing on an iron bridge with fog closing over her head and the water calling soft, the way a lover calls when he's been gone too long. She woke up crying for a man named Harlan she'd never met, writing his name on scraps of paper she found in her purse weeks later. She carried a locket, small oval of tarnished silver on a thin chain. When she opened it, there was a photograph inside, edges scalloped, a young soldier in an ill-fitting uniform staring solemn at the camera. Harlan at 21. I knew the face better than my own daddy's. The picture had come to her, she said, in a box of junk jewelry at an estate sale in Fountain City when she was 12.
She'd stolen it because something in the soldier's eyes made her chest hurt, and she'd worn it every day since without knowing why. I took her home that afternoon, drove her up 129 through the gorge, past the places the river used to flood before the dams, and she sat forward in the seat like a child on Christmas, naming turns I hadn't told her were coming. When we crossed the new bridge, she asked me to stop. I pulled over on the shoulder, and she got out, walked to the railing, and stood exactly where the old walking boards used to be. She ran her hand along the concrete slow, feeling for something that wasn't there anymore, humming, "In the sweet by and by," in a voice that cracked the same places Preacher McBee's had. That night she stayed in the spare room of the old home place I'd inherited and never had the heart to sell. She walked through the house touching things gently. Harlan's mama's pie safe, the nail where his hat hung for years, the window that still looks down on the river bend. She knew which floorboard squeaked by the cook stove, knew the cedar candle had once burned on the sill. Before she went to bed, she asked me to drive her back to the bridge the next day. Said she needed to see it at dusk, the way Ruth used to. I didn't sleep. Lay awake listening to her moving through the house after midnight, bare feet soft on the pine, humming that hymn like a lullaby. At some point the humming stopped and the back door opened and closed. I got up, heart hammering, and followed the sound of her footsteps down the gravel toward the river road. Moon was thin, just a fingernail, and the fog was already rising off the water thick as sheep wool. I lost her in it before I reached the bridge. I called her name till my throat was raw, walked the whole length shining my flashlight over the railing, looking for shoes, for anything. Nothing. Just the river running black and fast below, whispering over the rocks the way it always has. I stood there till the sky started going gray in the east, too afraid to leave in case she came walking back out of the mist. She never did. 2 days later, a kayaker found the locket snagged on a root just downstream from the bridge, chain snapped clean, picture of Harlan still inside, but the glass cracked in a perfect star. They brought it to me because my name was scratched on the back in handwriting I didn't recognize. For Ruth, love always, H. I keep it in the same drawer where Harlan's mama kept Ruth's wedding ring after the river gave it back. Some nights when the fog rolls up the holler thick enough to swallow the porch light, I hear footsteps on the bridge that aren't there anymore. Light, bare, a woman's step, pausing in the middle like she's looking downriver for a man who'll never come marching home. And sometimes, just before dawn, the scent of dogwoods drifts through the house even though the trees are months from blooming. I don't cross that bridge after the sun starts sinking anymore. Some waiting doesn't end just because the body does, and some promises outlive the tongue that made 'em. The clench still runs the same channel it always has, patient as grief, keeping what it takes and giving back only what it wants to. I figure one of these fog-thick evenings the footsteps will turn off the roadway and come up the path to the house. And when they do, I reckon I'll leave the door unlatched and the cedar candle burning. Because love don't always know when to lie down and stay dead. I just hope whatever comes back this time remembers to take the locket with her when she goes.
The quarry sits 3 miles back of Turkey Cove, up a logging road that washed out so long ago the pines grew right through the middle of it. Folks call it the Blue Hole now, on account of how the water stays the color of a new bruise no matter the season. In the summer of 1951, it was just the old limestone pit, half full from spring rains and quiet as a grave. That's where I put him. His name was Vernon something or other, a drifter with city shoes and a Carolina accent that didn't quite match. He came through on a Greyhound, got off at the store with a cardboard suitcase and a smile that showed too many teeth. Said he was looking for work, but mostly he was looking for cards. We played poker 3 nights straight in the back room of Junior Matheson's barn, kerosene lantern swinging from a nail, smoke thick enough to chew. Vernon was good, too good, and by Saturday night he had most of my paycheck and all of my pride. When I accused him of palming an ace, he laughed and called me a sore loser. I hit him with the cue ball still in my fist. Felt the nose go like a green stick. He came up swinging, got me good across the cheek, and then my daddy's .38 was in my hand, and the barn went quiet, except for the lantern hissing. 2 shots, one in the chest, one higher that took most of his jaw. He dropped like a feed sack and never made another sound. Junior helped me roll him in burlap, weighted him with plow chains, and we carried him to the quarry just before dawn. The water took him easy, hardly a ripple. We never spoke of it again. Junior died in Korea 6 months later, and I figured the secret went with him. I married Louise in '55, raised 3 young'uns, pumped gas at the same Esso, later Exxon, later just Ray's, until my knees gave out and the county finally paved the road. Kept my mouth shut, went to church when Louise made me, and never once drove past the turnoff to the quarry after dark. Some debts you pay by forgetting they're owed. It was a Tuesday in October 2023, the kind of day the mountains looked close enough to touch, when the bell above the door dinged and he walked in. Same cheap wool coat hanging off him, same crooked nose set a little left of center, same pale eyes that always looked like they knew where you hid your money. The years hadn't touched him. He looked exactly 33, same as the night I killed him. He stood there dripping on my floor mat, water running off his cuffs in steady streams, even though it hadn't rained in 2 weeks, and said, real calm, "You still owe me for that poker game, Ray." I knew the voice before I knew the face. It came up from the quarry floor, thick with silt and 72 years of patience. He didn't buy anything. Just stood by the coffee pot staring until I felt the room tilt. Then he tipped an imaginary hat and walked back out. The bell dinged again, and when I looked through the glass, he was gone. No truck, no footprints in the gravel, just wet prints leading to the edge of the lot and stopping dead. I closed at noon, hands shaking so bad I dropped the keys twice trying to lock the register. Drove home slow, checking the rear view like a man expecting sirens. The house looked the same, white asbestos siding, tin roof turning rust red, porch swing creaking in the wind. But every mirror inside was cracked clean through, spider webs running corner to corner like something had punched 'em from the other side. The shotgun over the mantel was still there, but when I broke it open, 2 shells were missing. I know I loaded it full the week Louise died. That night, the temperature dropped hard. I sat on the porch with the porch light off and the 12 gauge across my knees, listening to the dark. Around 2 o'clock, I heard it. Wet boots on gravel, slow and deliberate, coming up the driveway, same way Vernon used to walk when he was drunk and happy about it. Step, drag, pause. I worked the pump quiet as I could, but the sound just kept coming, closer, until I could smell the quarry on the air, cold limestone and still water. The footsteps stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. I waited for the boards to creak under weight that ought to be there, but they never did. Just the drip, drip, drip of water hitting the concrete, steady as a clock. I ain't left the house much since. Keep the curtains drawn and the radio turned loud to cover the quiet. Some mornings I find wet boot prints on the kitchen linoleum, size 10, leading from the back door to the hallway and stopping in front of the gun cabinet. The 2 missing shells are always sitting on the table when I wake up, dull brass gleaming like they've never been loaded. Last week the power went out in an ice storm. I sat by the fireplace with the shotgun and a flashlight, watching the flames die down to nothing. Around 3, the dripping started inside the house, steady, patient, coming closer. I followed the sound down the hall with the light shaking in my hand.
found a single trail of water leading to the bedroom I shared with Louise for 47 years. The closet door was standing open. Hanging from the rod on one of Louise's old wire hangers was the same wool coat, soaked through, still dripping into a puddle that spread slow across the floorboards. In the pocket was a deck of cards, bicycle brand, edges soft from quarry water. On top was the ace of spades, with a dark thumbprint right in the center. I sleep in the living room now, back to the wall, gun loaded with the last 5 shells I got. The mirrors stay cracked. I covered them with sheets the way folks do when somebody dies. Some nights the footsteps circle the house, slow, testing windows, trying the knobs. Other nights it's quiet enough to hear my own heart giving out one beat at a time. I know how this ends. One morning I'll wake up and the porch swing will be moving, slow and easy, like somebody just sat down heavy after a long walk home. Or I'll find the front door standing open and 2 sets of wet prints leading out, mine and his, heading up the old logging road toward the blue hole. I ain't decided yet whether I'll fight it when the time comes. 72 years is a long time to carry a debt, and part of me is tired of running from water that never forgets a face. Till then, I keep the light off and the gun close, listening for the sound of wet boots on gravel that always stops 1 step shy of the porch. He's patient, always was, and the quarry ain't going nowhere.
The house on Piney Ridge burned so hot the firemen said the flames were white at the center. It was February 1994, one of those nights when the cold gets inside your bones and sets up housekeeping. Laura had been drinking again, worse than usual, and the argument started over nothing, money, always money, and ended with me throwing the kerosene lamp I'd been filling. The glass shattered against the baseboard, the fuel ran under the couch, and the whoosh that followed swallowed her scream before it ever reached the ceiling. I stood on the porch watching it go, telling myself I'd go back in, telling myself I tried the door, but the heat pushed me down the steps like a living thing. By the time the volunteers got there, the roof had already fallen in. They found what was left of her curled in the bedroom closet, arms wrapped around the knees, like she tried to make herself small enough to disappear. I told them she must have knocked the lamp over herself. Everybody nodded real slow, the way folks do when they know better but ain't got proof. Insurance paid enough to start over. I married again, had a little girl named Emily in '99, moved us down to the valley where the ridges don't close in so tight. I never went back to Piney Ridge except once, to bulldoze the foundation flat and seed grass over the black place. Thought that was the end of it. Emily started kindergarten at Laurel Elementary in the fall of 2022. Cute little school, brick, playground with tires painted bright colors. First week she came home talking about a new friend named Lily who drew the prettiest houses. Lily said she used to live in a big white house with green shutters and a porch swing that sang when the wind moved it. Said her daddy went away and never came back. Emily thought that was sad and brought Lily an extra cookie the next day. The drawings started coming home after that. Crayon on manila paper. The house perfect in every detail. The rusted mailbox leaning like it always did. The chinaberry tree split by lightning in '89. Even the old washpot Mama used for flowers by the steps. Emily said Lily drew them during free time and always gave them to her to bring to Daddy. I laughed it off at first. Kids see pictures, kids copy. Until one evening Emily handed me a folded sheet and said Lily wanted me to have this one special. I opened it in the kitchen under the fluorescent light and felt my stomach drop clean through the floor. 2 stick figures inside a box of orange and yellow flames. One small, arms up like it was waving. One tall, holding a red rectangle with a black spout. At the bottom, in purple crayon, careful capital letters, Daddy did it. I went to the school the next morning, stood in the pickup line like any parent, heart hammering so hard I thought the other mothers could hear it.
When the door opened, the kids poured out, Emily waving, and there was Lily walking beside her, holding her hand. Skinny little thing, pale, hair the same dark brown Laura wore to her shoulders. She looked straight at me with eyes older than sin and smiled the smallest smile. Then she let go of Emily and walked over slow. The teacher was busy, nobody watching. Lily stopped 2 feet away, tilted her head, and whispered clear as spring water, "You didn't check the closet good enough, Paul." Nobody had called me Paul since Laura died. Everybody here knows me as Dale, the name I took from my stepdaddy when I moved counties. That night I drove back up to Piney Ridge with a shovel and a flashlight. The road's grown up nasty, briars snatching at the truck doors, but the home site's still there, a flat place in the weeds where the grass grows darker than anywhere else. Moon was thin, just enough light to see shapes. I started digging where the bedroom had been, clay hard as iron from 28 winters. Took me 2 hours to get down 4 feet. The smell hit first, old smoke and something sweeter underneath, like hair burning. Then the shovel scraped cloth. I went to my knees and clawed the rest with my hands. A tiny teddy bear, once white, now blackened and fused, one button eye hanging by a thread. I never bought Laura a bear like that, never saw it in the house, but the fabric still had a faint pattern of little yellow ducks. I sat there in the dirt till the sky started going gray, holding that bear like it was alive and hurting. When I finally stood up, my knees cracked like gunfire, and I knew I hadn't slept more than an hour at a time since. Lily still comes to school, still draws the house. Sometimes Emily brings me notes in that same purple crayon. I waited in the closet, or it's cold under the floor, or tell Mama I tried to be quiet. The teachers think Lily's got an imagination, maybe trouble at home. They've called DCS, but the address Lily gives belongs to a trailer that burned empty 10 years ago. No record of a child living there, no record of a Lily anywhere in the county. I see her watching me every afternoon from the swings, kicking slow, bare feet dragging furrows in the dirt. She never blinks. Last Thursday, she walked right up to the truck window while I was signing Emily out and pressed a new drawing against the glass. This one was different. The house again, but now there was a man out front digging a hole, and a little girl standing behind him with her hands on his shoulders. At the bottom, she'd written, "Found you." Emily doesn't play with Lily anymore. Says Lily told her the fire smelled like Daddy's lighter fluid, and that sometimes when you're bad, the smoke follows you forever. Emily wakes up crying about smoke in her room. I've started smelling it too, faint, like someone striking a match in the next room and blowing it out quick. I keep the bear in a coffee can under the truck seat. Some nights I drive up to Piney Ridge and sit there with the windows down, listening to the wind move through the weeds where the porch swing used to be. It still sounds like singing if you listen close enough. I ain't decided yet whether to fill the hole back in or dig it deeper. Part of me wants to lie down and pull the dirt over like a quilt. Part of me wants to keep running till the mountains run out. But the smell of kerosene is in my clothes now, soaked clean through to the skin. And every afternoon when that little girl looks at me with Laura's eyes and smiles that small, knowing smile, I hear the crackle starting up again, soft at first, like paper catching, waiting for me to strike the next match. I reckon some fires don't ever go all the way out. They just wait for the wind to shift and the night to get cold enough. Then they start creeping back toward the house, one slow ember at a time.